Welcome. We are delighted that each of you are here and that we are about to embark on a very timely and necessary topic, women as mentors. I don't know that there's any more urgent time than this that we begin to explore this topic. The way we're going to proceed in this is that each scholar will have 15-ish minutes to present her paper, and then we'll do a short Q&A after each of the papers, and then we will leave time at the end for us to have some integrated exchanges as we put both of these in conversation. Are there questions before we move in that direction? All right. So our first scholar is the newly minted Dr.-elect Emily Jendzejec, who just defended her dissertation in theology and education at Boston College. Her research and her dissertation has focused on young adult women, particularly those at the margins of the Catholic Church and their growing disaffiliation. Her work in its very nature is disciplinary as she's exploring belonging and spiritual identity. She has numerous publications, including those in cultivating interfaith leadership on college campuses and analyzing religious belief and belonging among emerging adults. And so, Jeniffer, to make sure that you have all the time promised and that you need, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Rebecca. Just wonderful to be with all of you, old friends and new friends alike. Thank you for the claps. It feels wonderful to be able to celebrate with a group that can know the huge hurdle and celebration it was last week to defend a dissertation after 6 long, nourishing years. So I'm just grateful to be with colleagues in this space. So as Rebecca said, I'm going to be presenting on finding mentors in the community of saints. I'm going to share a PowerPoint. So I'm going to do that first just to make sure it's up there. All right, can everyone see it? Okay, thumbs up. All right, so this paper is entitled Finding Mentors in the Communion of Saints, the Need for Diverse Role Models for Young Adult Catholic Women. This came from a chapter of my dissertation, so I'm really looking forward to continuing to think through how to get it from paper to being practical to support and help religious educators in their work with young adults. As we do in REA, we assume that everyone has read the papers. And so this is just the abstract in case for those who have not. So I'll just leave it here for a moment. And I want to begin by just sharing, as I did in the beginning of the paper, some vignettes and kind of the inspiration for this paper. So this inspiration came from my work as a Catholic chaplain at a women's college. And these are 2 of the vignettes I share in the paper. There are several more of sort of what the experience is and kind of what I was wrestling with when thinking about the communion of saints as a place for diverse role models. So I'll read these just to give us a sense of grounding it in lived experience. So this vignette 1. Marjorie had a deep devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe and often prayed the rosary in Spanish. She would go to the local parish whenever they had adoration and always invited other students to join her. She had a strong commitment to social justice that she attributed to Catholic social teaching and was planning to join the Jesuit Volunteer Corps when she graduated. She shared with me her anger with the church at the lack of women's leadership and often felt frustrated at Mass and angry that women could not be priests. She had begun to join her friends down the road at the United Church at Christ Church for service, but each time she went, she just said it didn't feel like home. Vignette 2. I received an email from Charlotte, a student at a nearby university who wanted to meet to talk. When we met, she shared that she was considering coming back to the church after years of being away. She said she had a few things to tell me first, and then she nervously blasted a laundry list. She was pro-choice, living with her Jewish boyfriend, and didn't really understand how the heck Mary was actually a virgin. When she was done with her list, she took a deep breath and with teary eyes confessed, "But I miss Mass and the Eucharist. I miss praying in a community. I miss the connection Catholicism gave me to my ancestors and my grandmother. I miss my spiritual home." So in these vignettes, the young women were all struggling with components of the institutional church and trying to figure out if they could stay in their spiritual home with integrity. The women expressed a tension with feeling that they somehow were becoming separated from their spiritual home because of their solidifying values, beliefs, and identity exploration. This process was one that was rife with grief as they questioned whether they could belong within their spiritual home. I argue that religious educators must help young adults realize that nobody actually fits neatly into a church box, nor that belonging is synonymous with uniformity. The role of religious educators is not to convince young adults to stay in the church or come back if they have rejected the tradition in the past, but to provide affirmation and models that reveal that there is a wide spectrum of belief and practice within the faith community. The point is to help young adults to move past feeling caught in a dualistic mindset where they see the options are to reject or be rejected from their spiritual home, or to not question and stay silent at inconsistencies they see in the vision and mission of the church. So there's two parts to the paper. I'll just briefly go over a few of the main points. Part one of the first section, which is entitled Feeling at Home in the Church, an Expansive Understanding of Belonging. So part one, understanding belonging in the context of faith development. So here I share that faith development is ultimately about expanding one's meaning-making capacity. So seeking, doubting, and questioning belonging are all parts of healthy faith development that are particularly acute during young adulthood. I use Sharon Delos Parks, who explains that the growth of the self and the development of faith may be understood as transformation of the boundaries that have defined home. And Parks argues that young adulthood is often a time that is filled with vulnerability and uncertainty as young adults begin to learn to trust their internal authority as they ask questions such as where and with whom do I belong? The second part of section one looks towards self-authorship. So I suggest that it can be helpful for religious educators to interpret the student's dissonance and struggle of losing a sense of home through the lens of constructivist developmental theories. Here I look at the work of Robert Keegan, who argues in his subject-object theory that development is a reorienting process. And then look more closely at Marcia Baxter Magolda, who builds on Keegan's work, specifically at her concept of crossroads, which in her 21-year longitudinal study, she noticed a lot with young adults in the college years being what she would call it a crossroads stage of development. Where they would wrestle, and clearly in these vignettes, it's highlighted, can I be Catholic and feminist? Can I be Catholic and queer? Can I be Catholic and pro-choice? So looking at it from this constructivist development lens is really helpful for religious educators so that they can help students navigate these questions about identity and belonging. So then I moved to the second section, which I entitled, Who Shares This Home With Me? The Importance of Exposure to Diverse Networks of Belonging. So part one, the role of the religious educator. So Parks and Keegan are both strong advocates for creating dynamic mentoring communities in order for development and growth to occur. Parks asserts that faith is a patterning, connective relational activity and embodied and shaped not within the individual alone, but in the comfort and challenges of the company we keep. So there's an opportunity for religious educators to cultivate dynamic networks of belonging in more effective and supportive ways that inform and nurture young adult faith development. And when cultivating networks of belonging, it is imperative that young adults are exposed to a diversity of ways of experiencing belonging. This also supports bridging opportunities in one's faith development. And in part two, I look at better utilizing the communion of saints, the need for diverse role models. I share some narratives of kind of personal story of when I would think of the saints. I would say up until my MDiv program of sort of being obedient and on a pedestal and people that I could not relate to. And really wanting to take saints off of that pedestal and be relatable for young adults. And one way of doing this is to expand and reinterpret the concept of sainthood. Now, this is firmly within the tradition of thinking about the communion of saints. But again, religious educators sitting with students and saying, the saints are not just people, untouchable people that are pious and obedient. Their everyday lived experiences are what makes them and us saints. So here I use the work of Elizabeth Johnson, who argues in reclaiming the communion of saints as a company of friends of God and prophets, which allows us to see the creative fidelity in the midst of everyday life. And then Robert Ellsberg, who argues that saints are those who in some partial way embody, literally incarnate the challenge for faith in their time and place. In doing so, they open a path that others might follow. Saints are not perfect humans, but in their own individual fashion, they become authentic human beings, endowed with the capacity to awaken the vocation in others. To call someone a saint means that his or her life should be taken with the utmost seriousness. It is a proof that the gospel can be lived. So I say that access to diverse and dynamic stories of female saints, both those in the past and those who live among us, can provide mentorship and role models for how to navigate belonging in a complex and nuanced way. The stories of female saints and discipleship have the potential to be transformative, not only for the young women to hear the stories in these specific chaplaincy moments, but I argue for the entire church community to be exposed to and transformed by the reality of how the body of Christ has, does, and will continue to function in the world. So this is not a part of the paper, but I just wanted to share this cloud of witnesses because it's a cloud of witnesses, again, moving to that practical piece of Catholic women who have been mentors and saints for me and who I have wonderfully used time and time again with students who are sitting in these crossroads spaces of how to be in a space of nuanced belonging, how to hold critique and love for a tradition simultaneously, moving towards that critical faith and faith development, and thinking about saints in the past and present. And so I'm happy to explore and say how I've used some of these amazing women in the question and answer, but I just wanted to share with you again, moving it into the practical, how do we continue to bring stories to life of Catholic women for the sake of the church community? So in conclusion, this paper argues for that religious educators can encourage faith development for young adult women by helping them comprehend an expansive understanding of a spiritual home. The hope is for young adult women to be able to embrace the paradoxes of their faith, to be critical believers, and to feel at home in the context of a dynamic and diverse community. To do this, religious educators must provide welcoming networks of belonging and viable mentor communities. Finally, I argue that a reimagining of the communion of saints can highlight a diverse and dynamic lineage of Catholic women who can serve as relatable role models for young adult women today. And I will stop there.
Thank you, Emily. That was quite interesting and fascinating, and very clear why you have sailed through your dissertation defense. So we're proud of you. So I wonder if there are folks on the screen that have a burning question that they want to kick off, start the conversation with. Yes, Norma.
Thank you for the paper. Often young adulthood is a time of leaving home, family of origin and so on. And I appreciate expanding the sense of what is home. So when we think about being mentors, maybe not historic saints, but being mentors, I'm thinking of, I taught at seminary for a long time, and many young women found me and still use me as a mentor. But I'd like you to think of some ways and places that women can be mentors in a broader sense of home. In my case, the seminary became a home for them, and I, one of their mentors. So thinking about broader ways to think of broader sense of home.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Norma. I think that's crucial. And thinking about the women on the screen that I posted there, you know, many different examples of that, whether it's, you know, some of them were my own professors. So a very similar example of mentors in that sense. Some of them I'm thinking of Jamie Manson, for example, who's currently Catholics for Choice president and has been in charge of sort of young adult faith sharing communities. So encouraging students to think about different ways to not only think about home locally, but what are people doing in different areas as well. She's someone that I would use as an example. So I think that is crucial, is that home is expansive in itself. It's not, there's no, I mean, there are specific boundaries that create what does it mean to be Catholic in this context, but that it is much more expansive than this one parish or this one youth group. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yes. Is it Monique?
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. It's Monique. And thank you, Emily, so much for what you shared with us, because I'm a professor at the Catholic University as well. And I noticed that even in universities, the role models are missing out, especially in the higher positions, in boards and even in professors. We still don't add up the supposed to division between gender, let alone all the other diversity issues. But focusing on this one, I'm very happy with this special research interest group, and also with your research. I'm looking forward to reading your entire dissertation, actually, because you really have now given us very condensed information, and we can read your paper, of course, but I would love to dive deeper into it, because it's so still needy that I that I realize even in the Catholic Church in particular, it's very much more difficult than in ordinary university life, because that's also a very hierarchic and paternalistic church. So I find it very difficult to always have the first prejudices for people. Why do you stay there as a woman when you can't be a priest, when they think this and that? And that's the extra image issues we have. So I always am very happy when I meet inspiring women like you, to realize we do not do this alone. That helps a lot. We can empower each other over the world. And I was hoping, because you are so into the subject, do you have suggestions how we could elaborate on that in regard to religious education and empowering each other? For this session helps already to stand out and say, I'm not alone in this, and I'm not the one that has the issues. So do you have any suggestions there? I would be so happy. And thank you once more for opening up with all this, and the beautiful quotes too. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. So at my defense last Thursday, it was an interesting move towards, you know, a lot of my work is focused on how religious educators can support students in this process. But where really interesting conversation went was like, how do we actually support mentors in being able to be explicit about their own beliefs and belonging? I talk a lot in my research about kind of ambivalent belonging around critique, being able to critique, conserve, and want to transform. So happy to talk more about that. But this idea of being able to articulate with mentors and create spaces for mentors to meet and be together and nurture one another in their work. So I guess the question, it wouldn't be a question, but one more idea would be to, yes, let's continue to talk and think about how we can support one another as mentors in this space in negotiating.
Great, thank you. Tracy?
Hi, Emily, that was wonderful, congratulations. I really appreciated your essay, and I don't know that I have a question or anything. I just wanted to raise up some of the things that you had mentioned and wrote about that flashed to my mind about the retelling of saints, particularly female saints, and kind of that what Mayan calls in her book Reset the Heart, the erasure of historical memory. You know, that the damage that we have done by the way that we've told these stories. You know, that the female saints are the ones that are the virgins.
Right.
not the men, you know, like we don't have to name that apparently. So I really want to raise up your work that you did with Elizabeth Johnson in naming that in so many critical ways of saying, you know, and it is the church in many ways with the young adults that I work with and have ministers that work with, you know, that it is inaccessible. You know, the tradition looks like a lofty goal, you know, and it's been primarily the way we've retold the stories of especially women as saints. And so I just want to say that I think you have a vast amount of research in there, and it's really powerful the way that you're reclaiming these stories for young adults. And I think that there's tremendous value in that. So thank you for your paper. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, I just feel that there's a lot to be done, and it's really exciting to think about like the practical aspects of like how can really we create curriculums for religious educators to make stories more accessible and dynamic, not just for this particular subset of women who are struggling with belonging, but in general, how do we lift up stories to make them accessible and to reclaim them beyond sort of a flat way that they have been perceived, which we know are not historically accurate all the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I was particularly captured by your notion of reorienting away from kind of our individualistic society towards the necessity of community if we're to find belonging. I mean, we don't find belonging just in and of ourselves, though that has to be, you know, a piece of that, being comfortable in our own skin, but it implies a sense of community. How would you talk with, how would you counsel or encourage these, going back to the vignettes early on at the beginning, for these young women to be mentored by people, saints, ranging from Ana Maria Sassi Diaz to Sean Copeland, that they may never have met. So how do you encourage people that I mean, I've never met Bell Hooks, but I would count her as a significant mentor. So how would you encourage these young women who are feeling disassociated and disaffiliated with the church community to be mentored by people that they may never have met?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get really excited about this because like the ideas are, this is what I would hope for. You know, I think for me and my own experience as a religious educator is continue to curate and create like a library, right? So that when I'm sitting with a student who's really struggling, particularly with, you know, thinking about, you know, for example, I'll use Jamie Manson again just because I did, thinking about reproductive rights and Catholicism, knowing I have an article she recently wrote, right, and being able to send it to the student. So I think that's a little bit on the religious educator to say, here's a piece, here's an invitation to learn. Like I'm sure, Rebecca, at some point someone introduced you to writings of Bell Hooks, and for some reason, you know, and it stuck with you. So being able to have that, I think particularly with this generation, multimedia. And so thinking about, I have here, like Olga Segura has a great personal website, lots of blogs. So sending them that way. I have a dream someday to continue to curate this so that the stories again are more living examples. I know James Martin created kind of My Life with the Saints, their YouTube short vignette YouTube videos of the saints. I think they were well done. I think there is ample room to update and create kind of those kind of tools for religious educators to continue to make these stories alive and accessible.
Patricia.
Thank you. Emily, I am wondering if you could comment a bit or what your thoughts are on the connection between the trustworthy relationship that the people you've worked with in your ministry settings have with you and their ability to, or the insight that women saints present and past are also in some way trustworthy, even with all the foibles they have, because all of us are human beings with clay feet. How does that move happen from their sense of trust in you to their access to this rich well of the stories of the women who came before?
Yeah, it's good to see you, Patricia. Thank you for the question. And I think this gets, and I think this is underlying your question of when we're thinking about Keegan, right? Looking at it from a constructivist developmental theory of sort of thinking about most of these young adults and most likely high second order towards third order of looking for trusted authorities. So they're still developing their internal authority, but wanting, seeking for trusted authority to offer them. And I think that that piece of sort of me as a religious educator that they can trust and offering them trustworthy, because I am a trusted authority, then these become trusted authorities as well. I think there's a piece of that. And I think it gets to Monique's point of how do we continue to cultivate mentors and being able to offer more resources beyond just one person. So I think that's where I would go with that, is just continuing to support mentors in their own ability to think beyond just their trusted authority, but who else they're looking towards. Yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts, Patricia, on that. I know you've been doing work on it as well.
I was trying to probe a little more about what happens in the young adults, but we don't, your answer is helpful in terms of the mentors. So thanks, Emily.
Yeah, I think I a little bit more about that. I think what the help is, and kind of connecting the dots, is providing that scaffolding so that these mentors provide a model for how to belong that may be different than what they have seen before. So it's kind of scaffolding and mentors of having these mentors like in maybe fourth order, being able to kind of hold paradox, critique, love simultaneously. And so kind of being bridging opportunities. So that's what I'm always looking for, sort of bridging opportunities for students to move towards self-authorship.
Thanks, Emily.
Emily, we have had a request for you to put some of the suggested resources that you named in the chat as we move through the session. And I believe that the recording will also be made available, but if you have that at your fingertips as we transition into the next portion of our presentations today, if you might drop those in chat. All right, any last questions? We'll have a chance to come back and put these two powerful presentations in conversation with one another, but any last thing before we move to Jeniffer's presentation? All right. So I am pleased and honored to present, to introduce you to Jeniffer Wowor, who is assistant professor on the Faculty of Theology at the Universitas Kristen Duta Wacana Yogyakarta. I apologize for fumbling with pronunciation. Jeniffer is an ordained pastor in the Church of Indonesia. She has served in many different ways and is continuing she has a master's in Christian education from Presbyterian University and Theological Seminary in Seoul, South Korea, and is currently pursuing her PhD in religious education from Fordham University. Her research focuses on arts-based liberative pedagogy. We've seen, I think, in the last few years, the power of art to both foster and support the work of social justice and liberation across communities and cultures. And she's particularly exploring the meaning of resistance from East Sumba hand-woven textiles She too has authored a number of articles, and we are excited to hear what you have to share with us. And I do know that she has a PowerPoint as well. Jeniffer, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity, Rebecca. Thank you also for great insights in your presentation, Emily. It's an honor to have the opportunity to address such a great audience. And allow me to share the screen first. I would like to present my paper entitled Weaving Ancestral Wisdom, Communicating the Power of Sumbanese Women's Resistance to the Next Generation. I want to say at the beginning of the presentation that I honor the light from one of the ancestors in my life, Dr. Stefano Montano. He is my professor at Fordham, who died last year. Discussions in his class sparked my interest in exploring this topic. I appreciate his life and dedication as a great teacher in my life. Thank you also to Dr. Harold Horrell, who gave many inputs for the draft paper of this presentation. I also see Dr. Rachel Green and Dr. Tabitha Kartika Christiani here. Thank you for the support that encouraged me to voice authentic ideas from my life experiences as a religious educator. Now let me start my presentation. This is the abstract of my paper. You can just read it in a very fast way if you haven't changed an opportunity to read it before. My great-grandmother comes from Nusa Tenggara Timur province, the same province as Sumba Island. She collected hand-woven textiles, a famous product of Nusa Tenggara Timur, which have been passed down in our family from generation to generation. Unfortunately, when my family faced economic crisis, my grandmother sold the textiles. None are left in our family, but the hand-woven textiles helped the family to survive. The same reality also exists in Sumba. Weaving provides many benefits in life and promotes the economy of people who are still living in poverty. In February 2021, data showed that Nusa Tenggara Timur province was the third poorest of all provinces in Indonesia. In 2016, I taught as a guest lecturer at a theological school in East Sumba, owned by Gereja Kristen Sumba, or the Sumba Christian Church. I received Sumba hand-woven textiles as a gift at that time, as well as bought some from women weavers I met. I admired the motifs, enjoyed their distinctive smell, was captivated by the strong texture, and saw the high quality of the hand-woven textile. I have some hand-woven textiles in which, between the patterns, there are several long white hairs. Based on my conversation with a woman weaver, I know that the hair of an old woman weaver gets caught in the textile when she is weaving. In this, I'm reminded that women have to weave amid their busy domestic duties in the patriarchal society of Sumba. For example, in Sumba, there is still a tradition of kawin tangkap or bridge kidnapping. Women are forced to marry. In that case, I can say that a piece of hand-woven textile was born from an extraordinary struggle. This was when I began collecting and studying the meaning of the motifs in East Sumba hand-woven textiles. I feel strengthened through the stories of resistance and the meaning of the motifs, especially when facing challenges in my life, including the COVID-19 pandemic. The argument in my paper is focused in 4 stages. The first one is an explanation of the current context of women weavers in Sumba, an academic study of post-colonial imagination that is connected with narratives of resistance in the motifs of East Sumba handwoven textiles, insights from developmental and religious educational values, and the last stage is illustrating the arts-based liberative pedagogy framed by the 3 steps of exploration, integration, and collaboration that enriches the church educational ministry as part of the struggle against grand narratives of colonial legacy, especially in the context of colonial heritage churches in Indonesia. I use qualitative methodology through narrative inquiry in an arts-based genre with 3 sources you can see on the screen and also read in my paper. The primary question is, what is the form of arts-based liberative pedagogy which gives space to explore the meaning of resistance from East Sumba handwoven textiles? This is Sumba Island in Indonesian map, you can see. This is the location of the Sumba Island in Nusa Tenggara Timur province. It is located in Nusa Tenggara Timur province in Indonesian map. This is the province and this is the island. This is explanation of the research process. I will not explain in detail. You can read it in my paper. I will explain a little bit about weaving. In Sumba, weaving provides many benefits in life and promotes the economy of people who are still living in poverty. As an artistic activity, weaving has a particularly important socio-religious meaning in the life of the people of Sumba. Women give their bodies to be sacrificed in the weaving process, starting from the skin on the fingers that thin out due to continuous contact with the loom and the skin color of the hands that become dark because they have to mix natural colors in such a way. Weaving is a space for women to negotiate with life's tough struggles. This process formed their faith. Women weavers pray and fast before and during weaving to produce good and valuable for the wearer. The uniqueness of the Sumba hand-woven textiles also lies in their storytelling motifs. Narrative is an inseparable part of the lives of women weavers. Interestingly, there are also motifs related to women's resistance to the Dutch colonialization of Sumba in the past. Based on the research analysis, the presence of these motifs today is related to the ongoing influence of colonialism. In the middle of injustice reality, poverty and gender inequality in the patriarchal culture and colonial legacy, for example, the imitation of Sumba weaving and its motifs using machine-made factory weaving and chemical dyes in the global market, women weavers in East Sumba can express their voices of resistance through hand-woven textile motifs. We can say weaving as an alat ungkap or expression tool. It shows that they have a vital role in society, although their contribution remains unrecognized. While most of the population in East Sumba are also Christians, it is important to see how Christianity is connected with the values inherited from the colonial period. I argue that the motif of resistance in Sumba hand-woven textiles becomes an important aspect that supports an arts-based liberative pedagogy in religious education as part of the struggle against grand narratives of colonial legacy. It describes an analysis of Indonesian women's effort of resistance that can contribute to religious educators, practical theologians, practitioners, and scholars interested in arts-based liberative pedagogy. My research findings related to narratives of resistance in the motifs of East Sumba hand-woven textiles. It was studied from several perspectives. The first is the post-colonial imagination and feminist theology. I used some insights from Kwok Pui-Line's book. In post-colonial imagination, there are 3 aspects: historical imagination, dialogical imagination, and diasporic imagination. In these 3 aspects, I describe several things. The first one is an understanding of each aspect, which is analyzed with the findings of research and related to the Sumba context. For historical imagination, I focus to the colonial history in Sumba. For dialogical imagination, I focus to a theological aspect of religious handwoven textiles. And for diasporic imagination, I focus on exploring cross-cultural engagement, including the possibility of interfaith collaboration in the expanded context. In each aspect, I also describe handwoven textile motifs and narratives of resistance behind the motif, insights that obtained from the analysis process, and also reflexivity. It's very important in narrative inquiry because reflexivity can bring awareness to oneself as participant or a researcher in the research. And you can see the structure appears the same structure, understanding and analysis, emotive, narrative of resistance, insights, and reflexivity. Also in the dialogical imagination, the same structure appears, narrative of resistance, emotive. This is Jesus as Redeemer. You can see the meaning deeply in my paper. As my background, I put the handwoven textile, reflexivity and diasporic imagination, narrative of resistance with emotive, insights, and reflexivity. Through this study, I can say that the meaning of resistance in the motifs of East Sumba handwoven textiles becomes significant in the perspective of post-colonial imagination and feminist theology. Weaving becomes the third space for women weavers working in the spirit of resistance. The next perspective to explore narratives of resistance in the motifs of East Sumba handwoven textiles is carried out through dialogue with important values in the development of women's faith, according to Nicholas Lee, and exploration of decolonial values in Christian religious education in Indonesian context from Mariska Lauterbom. This is the explanation. And I then continued the discussion with an attempt to embody the idea of liberative pedagogy from Paulo Freire, which provides a place for the narrative of resistance. I also explored the aesthetic dimension of the beauty of Sumbanese weaving as works of art that have artistic value through Maria Harris' ideas about religious imagination and aesthetic teaching. These perspectives, combined with the analysis in the previous section, lay the foundation for me to offer an arts-based liberative pedagogy in the next session. I put some insights from Paulo Freire and also Maria Harris here. And then in this connection, there is an engagement with our ancestors' wisdom and the next generation. The pedagogy that can be carried out in 3 steps: exploration, integration, and collaboration. The process is not hierarchical, but dynamic and relational. You can see that in exploration, we can build connections with women weavers, her past, history, ancestor, her present, and her future, her hope. The question is what matters most to her. It invites us to imagine and see something that was not seen before. It's widened visual experience through aesthetic exploration of the artistic dimensions of handwoven textiles. The next step is integration. It's an attempt to dialogue the findings of the exploration stage with our narratives. It builds connections with our past experience, our history, our ancestor, present, our context, and our future, hope. It engages our text of life, our narratives, our biblical text, or other sources. The question is, what matters most to me? It invites us to use our imaginations to express the results of reflection in a work of art through symbol, metaphor, sign, etc. And the collaboration seeks to engage our feelings and experiences as a form of resistance to the reality of the injustice born of colonial grand narratives in various forms. It builds connections with past experience in communal history or communal ancestors, present experiences, communal context, and future experiences, communal hope. The question is what matters most to us. It invites us to express imagination through collaborative arts projects in communal symbolic actions. This brings us to actual action in the public sphere as a form of advocacy against every form of colonial discourse that shackles women, including women weavers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We appreciate that. I've had several both public and personal requests for your PowerPoint. There was so much there, and the ways in which you, in many ways, diagrammed out your ideas in the PowerPoint. We're wondering, would it be possible for you to put a link to the PowerPoint in the chat? And then we'll ask Lakeisha if it's possible to post the PowerPoint with the recording for folks who may not be in the session. All right, are there questions? Who would like to start off our conversation? I know I grew up and a part of the Appalachian culture and remember grandparents and grandmothers and great-grandmothers quilting and wondered about, you know, automatically then it made me start reframing that practice of quilting, which women sat and did in a significantly hierarchical society in Appalachia, and what that might be. So thank you for sparking that idea. Have you had, in what ways have you engaged that community of women artists in their understanding of what they're doing as liberative pedagogy?
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. To explore the narratives behind the motifs, I established informal communication with women weavers from my first encounter when I came to Sumba in 2016. I also engaged with women weavers through my female pastor friends in Sumba. The role of a female pastor based on my research is very important in this process. When the pandemic hit, I continued the communication by phone and WhatsApp, especially with the weavers of the Paluan Dalam Hamu. The meaning of Paluan Dalam Hamu is hand in hand towards a good directions. A weaving group in Canberra is Sumba. I validated the meanings through reconfirmation with the weavers and was assisted by literature on the meaning of Sumba hand-woven textile motifs and the culture of the Sumbanese people, including those literature written by some female theologians from Sumba, as well as researchers and collectors of Nusa Tenggara Timur hand-woven textiles. This approach taken is dialogue, including exploring passed down oral wisdom. This process shows that the strong role of women who are able to pass on the values of life, including the value of resistance to the next generation. This educational model does not only extend to girls, but to boys as well. When they grow up, they get involved in the art of weaving by making their own resistance motifs creatively.
Quite powerful. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes, Eileen.
Jennifer, I wonder how much of the figurative work in the tapestries is handed down from old traditions versus how much room is there for women to incorporate new images, new challenges, new problems that didn't exist when their grandmothers were doing this. So the figurative content, does it change, or are they mostly doing what's been depicted for generations?
Yeah, there are two models in this process. They try to engage the motif that already received and they learned from the ancestor, from their mother, their grandmother. But based on the research, they also create a new motif. For example, the motif of Jesus as Redeemer, you can see in my background. They create only one person that create this motif. She is 71 years old now. It was created around 1992. You can see the explanation of the conversation and the narrative in my paper. But you can see that this is Jesus in the form of people of color. It's not a white Jesus, but as you say, you can see that can you see in my background, the form of the feet, you know, it's very authentic and only one person that make it in the world. The form is the mamuli. What is mamuli? It shapes like woman's womb. So you can see this is mamuli, the symbol of wealthy and a wisdom that woman is a source of life. It's their voice in the middle of patriarchal society. So it was created to support, and you can see also the other motifs. This is Patola Ratu. This is female motif that give a very great appreciation and power, respect to women, not only for men. And you can see there are also some motifs related with female power. It was created only by one person, one woman. I know she's already old, but Paluanda Hama Pangkudet, a weaving group, it was created by her. And now her children continue her work.
Cool.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rochelle?
Thank you. And thank you, Jennifer. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see more art from you. So my question's about the relationship between these practices from these women and the church, and your conversations, particularly with the female pastors as well. I'm wondering, I mean, in your paper, you talk about that the church's educational ministries might be able to benefit, right, to learn from arts-based pedagogy. So I'm wondering whether in your conversations with the pastors, or even in your conversations with the women, what that relationship between the church and these women could look like, if any of that came up. I also don't want to suggest that the church needs to control any of these practices, because they can exist independent. But I do think you can learn from something without taking it over. So I'm wondering what learnings you have either heard or would like to see between what you've learned with these women and their practices and your hopes for the church.
Yes, because I also engage with my friend, female pastors from East Sumba. So sometimes I would conversation also with them. They told me as a pastor that they learn so much from the weavers itself now, because in the past, even the logo of the church itself, the Christian church in Sumba, it's powerful with colonial message, you know, and then they try to embrace the motif, not only the motif now, but also the meaning into the church, not only as a decoration, as a usual way, but also to embrace the meaning. Even the pastor always try to use also the sarong now, the motif, and try to explore the understanding through the conversation with the weaver itself. But there is also a kind of hope that this practice not only come from the Sumba context itself, but also outside Sumba. Sometimes you only think that one practice should be done by the people in the context, in that context, but we need to embrace a broader context. It's part of collaboration. So people from other contexts, even people that never know before about the handwoven textiles, they can learn, they can explore. It's part of the 3 steps of pedagogy that I offered in the last part of my paper. Exploration, integration, and collaboration. Honestly, I already tried that process with the people in Sumba through the communication with my friends there, my pastor's friends, female pastors there, and I received some feedback. Then I put in the last part of my paper. So I think it's really important to all people to engage not only in the cognitive way, but to feel and to sense, because if you touch and you feel, you can smell, you can try the sensation, because in my opinion, it has energy to strengthen you and you need to feel it. I cannot explain it, you need to feel it. So I just want to make the hope and open the space to explore that possibility.
Thank you. It's a good question, good engagement. Any other questions or comments particular to Jeniffer's presentation as we head into our final 30 minutes? Let's put these two into conversation with one another. I wonder how the practice of art would foster, how the practice of art as resistance and liberation might foster a stronger sense of belonging that Emily was talking about, and the ways in which, if that's not a part of your culture, how might we invite and engage young adult women in the practice of liberative art as a way of belonging, fostering belonging?
I think belonging, in my opinion, belonging, it's the most important aspect in arts liberative pedagogy. And I enrich also by Emily in this part, because how to create the sense of belonging if it's not come from your own context. Arts can help you to strengthen that feeling, that sense. I can say sense, because I already know, I've known about this kind of handwoven textiles before, but when I engage directly and I try to see, my first encounter is not with the woman weaver itself, but with the handwoven textiles. So it can be kind of, as I mentioned in my presentation, alat ungkap, a tool. It's a tool to bring you. And if you engage and you try to collaborate with it directly, the sense of belonging, I like to collect the handwoven textiles now, so I can say it because I feel it and I sense it. I hope if you can touch it directly and you can smell, you can try the sensation, you can connect also with the great experience of the weaver behind. Women weavers, they never put their name in the textile, the handwoven textile. It's not like a painting. You can put your name there, but no, they don't want to put their name because they say that this is my body. So you don't need to know me directly, but you can understand my values. But sometimes people, they don't understand the values and the meaning. So they can say, it's too expensive, and they choose to buy another hand-woven textile, not hand-woven, woven textile with machine, and then they didn't appreciate the meaning behind the motif. But then I think if you understand and you can explore and you can sense it, you can feel it, and you can even communicate it with your own narrative, so the sense of belonging, I think, will be stronger and stronger.
Thank you. Emily?
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jennifer, so much. I just want to sit with your material for a very long time. One piece I would just add to that is, particularly in the context of art, is just continuing to expand the religious imagination. I mean, even Jennifer, in your own description and the Jesus behind you and the feminine nature of creation, my own religious imagination is being expanded. And so continuing to bring that into the context of mentoring communities, permission of creativity and expanding religious imagination, I think is crucial. And being able to do that in exploring contexts that are not one's own with integrity and creative ways, I think is really wonderful and a powerful, as you said, Jennifer, tool to engage one in reflection on their own tradition as well.
Let me add a little bit. I remember a quote from Brenda Lellman and Edward Robinson. I will read it to all of you. The act of creation does not finish with the work of the original artist. It is not there that matter most now. They have done their work. Now it is up to us if that work is to attain full stature. So it's an invitation, as mentioned by Maria Harris, invitation for all of us, not only for Sumba women or Indonesian women, but also for all of us, because, you know, as mentioned by Ernst Barlach, two are needed for every art, one who makes it and one who needs it.
What a great phrase. One who makes it and one who needs it. That's just marvelous. Thank you. Eileen.
Yeah, I kind of want to take that very concept a little bit back into Emily's situation. She wants the women saints of the Catholic tradition to be there as mentors. And what's interesting is that because the Catholic tradition sort of never let go of figurative art, there are countless depictions of each of the saints she's talking about, and each of them will emphasize a different aspect of that saint. And so some might emphasize their courage, another might emphasize the pain they endured. Take, I don't know, the wheel on which St. Elizabeth was stretched. So it's just one more way in which the art can serve. I mean, that's, I think, part of the dialogue between what Jennifer and Emily have done here. It's great. Oh, we have a guest.
We are a very child-friendly session. Both Jennifer and Lakeisha's new little one has been with us as well. I don't want to insert myself here quite yet. So other questions, thoughts? Norma. Unmute, please.
I was going to write this, but I'll ask it in person. I think of music as part of the arts. And I think of women singing as they would work together, sometimes in the fields and in various oppressed situations. And Emily, I think of Roman Catholic orders where the women would sing the hours. And it was always, in fact, I belonged to a religious order as a Lutheran, a women's order, and singing together was a way to belong and be part of community. So I'd like for you to answer or think about, or anyone think about music as the part of the arts.
Thank you. Lakeisha?
Hello, I'm gonna stay off screen. We're doing some nursing here. But I just wanted to thank both of you. So, I mean, what you guys are talking about is my jam, right? Like it's like, I'm over here just getting excited. Because I mean, I'm thinking about the arts and, you know, I call things play. I feel like we call it so many different things. And I just think about how powerful they are and how powerful they've been in my teaching. And as you're speaking, Jeniffer and Emily, but thinking about belonging and, you know, doing these practices in classes, having people paint, having them do Play-Doh, having them do puzzles, having them dance. Yeah, people dancing in class, you know, it's risky, but you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think bringing in these different mediums is allowing this different form of expression, right? Like this different form of, I can see myself, not only can I see myself reflected, but I can see you in your wholeness, your full embodied wholeness, which again, as women and being in these spaces, it's not just us, we're bringing our full embodied selves. And I think that is so important to think about. And I think that the arts opens up not just the art itself, but remembering that it comes from an embodied person that did this work with their hands, that did this work with their heart, with their wholeness. And I just think what both of you are bringing is so wonderful and amazing. And I'm just hoping that it makes it into more classrooms, into more Sunday schools, into more churches, especially thinking about just young people and having these outlets to feel like they belong, they feel seen. I might not know the right words to say, but I can draw this and express this, or I can weave this and I can express this, and letting them know that no matter what, you are a child of God and you are loved and seen, regardless of your intellectual medium, regardless of how you are communicating, but it's all part of it. And so I'm just so grateful to hear it and to see it. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you guys. I'm so grateful and I'm excited about this session.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lakeisha. That's a wonderful segue into where I wanted to go. I want to open this to those who are on screen and those who are present without with their screens on mute. So you know, one of the gifts that is REA is the bringing together of scholars and practitioners. So how might we take what Jeniffer and Emily have presented so beautifully and profoundly to and with us? How will we now incorporate it into the practices in our congregations, in our classrooms, on the streets as we do social justice? My mentor, one I actually spent lots of time with, used to say, the work of justice can weigh heavy on the soul. Therefore, we must engage in art so that beauty can lift and sustain the work of dismantling social injustice. I'll put that in the chat. That's Katie Geneva Cannon, who said that often in class. So what will we take from here? How will we continue the conversation that we've had today in our particular places and contexts of ministry? Kathy?
Yes, since I left the seminary, or the seminary left me, shall we say, been job hunting and working in different fields now educationally, in the nonprofit world as well. And I do social justice work through my own agency that I direct. I've directed for 30 years. having worked in Indonesia, so I know very well, we've been there for 30 years. I understand what she's talking about. And since my brain aneurysm and my near death, I have changed, completely changed. It changed my life and my thinking from an academic mentality to a non-academic mentality. And in the last year, looking at the violence and the injustice, I don't look now at academic sources. And what I take away today, the reason I came is I'm very much into the mentoring because my experience, and I'm coming from left field in a sense, from a very non-academic. While I was in the ICU, I had conversations with God. I could put it in no other terms. While I was in a waiting area in the spiritual realm, when they weren't sure I was going to live, I sat there and they were trying to revive me several times. That's where I was. And when God finally said, it's not your time. But one conversation I had, God said, doctrine and theology is not going to save you and will not save the world. And you need to understand once and for all that it is love. I created you with love, and my love flows in your veins, and you better start understanding that and living that. And that's what I focused on this last year. And that's what I've been trying to understand, how to go back to what King talked about was beloved community. And through my mentoring practice and work with former students who, God bless them, have really reached out to me. I've had more conversations now with them and with young adults, has been this concept of how do I integrate that now with what I know about my practices of religious education? How do I mentor that sense of beloved community? And that's been my focus on my takeaways when I look at mentoring. And it's been so non-theological in that sense. That's the only thing I can look at these days. My life is completely 180 turn. It's not the same. That's all I can say. So that's been my takeaway when I hear mentoring discussions and our discussions. And that's why I look at it, it's love, because it's arguing with someone about a gun and this and that and social justice. We've got to find a way to take that conversation with people to that level. To be honest, in my opinion, is how are we going to, in mentoring with people and talking with the next generation? And that's what, to me, opens their hearts. The young adults I've been talking to recently in a program, a gap year program, that's what they're interested in. They look at me when I start talking theology, their eyes sort of glaze over, kind of thing. They're not interested. But when I start talking about love, they go, wow, okay, yeah. How do I do that? What does that really mean? We talk about this love, what does that really mean? So that's my shtick, my 2 cents on this. I mean, I loved our conversation. I love the scholarship of our 2 presenters, and God bless you both for that conversation.
Thank you, Kathy. Others? Well, others.
Well, I just would like to thank, put on my video. Yeah, there we are. I also want to thank Katie for her opening up here. I remember the last time we saw you starting the opening session with claiming how aware you were that everybody in itself also is a racist. And I've taken that with me, and you being my female mentor there, to open it up in our diverse context in the Netherlands quite often, actually. So I want to thank you for being here and telling us about love. And I think that's what's connecting us together, that we really stick to each other and stand into this world mentioning this out loud. And it's awesome if it's not only females doing this, because it's always seen as the soft spot and the emotional spot to talk about love and care and all that. But the world is in very much need for women and men that stand up and say, no, it's not a soft spot, it's the essential, unique spot in human beings. And I think we are ready for that. And thank you for giving us that, Katie, and thank you, Jennifer and Emily, for what you brought into this session, and Rebecca chairing it, because I think let's connect like this. And at least the next REA session, we have a female mentor or a working group or something like that. That's quite easy done, and I would love to share that and share it, but also share it and be there at least together. And also perhaps in the meantime, every 2-3 months or so, to have just a quick catch up. Are we doing, oh, okay, do we need a little empowering? It can be so easy. This is doing so much in, just an hour and a half in a way. So thank you all for that. And I just wanted to bring this into our group. Thank you.
I just add on there, I just appreciate, Monique, what you just said, and Kathy, I think you just modeled so beautifully mentoring and at its finest in the sense of vulnerability and the complexity and messiness of life. I think often, at least when I was brought up, the idea of mentorship or sainthood is like someone who has it all together and it's perfect, right? And is at like the pinnacle of their career, and that's who you want to mentor you. And learning in my own journey and with others, like that's not the goal. It's how do we be in this world? Who are we in this world? Committed to love, committed to justice. And that's complex and messy and not perfect. And if we can continue to lift up models and be models ourselves in that way that is grounded and rooted in hope, but also vulnerability and messiness, I think we're on the right path together.
Yes, both Monique and Emily, wonderful comments. I think it raises also the question, and it draws us back to the question that was raised earlier, then who mentors mentors? You know, as women, as we mentor others and give and pour out, where are the places where we go? Where are the places where we get replenished as our mentors transition into the church triumphant? Kind of what are those spaces where we can come together and do art, where we can come together and be nourished and renewed ourselves? Rochelle.
Yeah, I'm sitting here. It's more of a thought or a connection between the two papers that I think I'm just going to take with me from this session and continue to reflect on from here on out. But I'm sitting with that image, Jennifer, that you gave of the women's hairs that get caught in the weaving, so that they're literal pieces of her that are bound up in her work. We may never know her name. She doesn't put her name on it, but there are pieces of her that are bound up in her work that get passed on from generation to generation as you pass these pieces together. And so I'm sitting with that image, and I'm sitting with Emily, your emphasis on helping us to rethink what belonging looks like, feels like, and that it doesn't require uniformity, but it requires something much more expansive. And so I'm sitting with the uniqueness of these pieces of art and the value of them. Now, yes, they're more expensive than the ones you can get made by machine. Absolutely. But the ones made by a machine, they can just replicate a bunch of the same ones over and over again. There's something unique and valuable about these. And so part of the work of educators is to help people understand the value of what it is that we have. Because that's the only way we will choose that over something else. We have to have something else to value. And so I'm sitting with the kind of the way these two ideas come together, how art makes us appreciate the world in different ways, and then makes us think differently about what does it mean for me to be myself and to be a part of something unique, but a part of something. And so I just wanted to thank you both for that, and just the way I think it will impact those of us who are working in educational spaces, to think about what it means to create spaces where individuals in all of their uniqueness can feel that they belong in a place without having to conform to do so. So I just want to thank you both.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rochelle. As we move towards the end of our time, and certainly if our conversation has come to a natural end, we won't push it. But I wonder if Jennifer and Emily would like to have an opportunity to kind of recap as you've listened to one another's papers and presentations, as you've listened to the conversation and been a part of this place of community and engagement. If you have some closing thoughts.
I think I'm just really grateful for this session, and I hope it's a continued conversation, because I think that as we continues to push it, like it's an active conversation of how we continue to do this work together in itself as a mentoring community for one another. So I appreciate that. And just to talk a little bit more on Rochelle's point, I'm so grateful for that concept of how we continuing to think about belonging with our students and those in our classrooms. And I also think it doesn't stop just at where we say you are affirmed in who you are, you're belonging great. It's then how do we invite participation? And Jennifer, I think your example is just so beautiful. And how do we affirm the agency and theology behind these women weavers and what they are doing? And so continuing to think, not just inviting the individual into the community, but how is the individual then compelled to participate? And that community continues to be transformed by those who are involved in it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much also, Emily, for your great insights and presentation. It's really strengthened also my understanding. And again, I just want to repeat again the statement from Ernst Barlach: two are needed for every art, one who makes it and one who needs it. In this section, we are all women and also men become mentors, and we need to acknowledge our great role in the generation, not only our present context, but also in the future. We need to guide all people through to our wisdom, using the spirit of resistance. It is kind of invitation also, so we can be build a strong community to strengthen each other. And I hope this is not the end of the process. This is the beginning, and we can still and always enrich by each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, both of you. Any last comments? All right, we'll do a moment of housekeeping, and I'll draw your attention to the feedback. The link is in the chat. Jennifer also put her PowerPoint in the chat. It takes a moment for it to download. If you click, it'll take depending on how many windows you have open on your computer, and we won't discuss how many I have open at the moment, is how long it will take to download, but give yourself some time to do that.
Rebecca, I will send it also to Lakeisha by email. So if you cannot download it now, so you can reach it through another way.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you.
I'll make sure I'll make sure it gets up, and just make sure we cite our sources. Make sure we give credit where it's due.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Emily, if you wanted to share anything, you are more than welcome to do that as well. So I want to officially and deeply thank Emily and Jennifer for sparking our imagination, for bringing scholarship into conversation with practice, for modeling for us how to do this in whatever context we find ourselves. I'm thankful for each of you and for your presence among us, and for excited to see all that you will do as you move forward post-dissertation defense, and to see what's coming now and in the future. Thank you both, and thank each of you for being here today and for engaging so deeply in this conversation. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Great to be with everyone.
Thank you. Bye all.